This coaster has one of the best launches out there, and that's only part of what makes Storm Runner an awesome ride.
I'm gonna rank every coaster and give them a review. Every drop and every hill, every launch and every loop. Rate it 1 to 10 and then we'll do it all again. Gonna rank and review every coaster.
Storm Runner at Hersheypark is an Intamin accelerator coaster, and this model is known for two things: having an outstanding, rapidly accelerating hydraulic launch, and extensive amounts of downtime. Just to give you an example, the first coaster of this kind, Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm, has been closed for over a year and a half. And to bring it back to the coaster at hand, Storm Runner itself has also faced a full season of downtime. Heck, it was even closed the entire first day I visited Hersheypark. But questionable reliability aside, Storm Runner delivers a remarkably exhilarating and fast-paced ride experience. And while its launch is truly extraordinary, this coaster features multiple other notable highlights as well. Storm Runner has a height of 150 feet, but it has an even larger drop of 180 feet. This drop is at a 90-degree angle, and it takes you to your top speed of 75 miles per hour. The acceleration of the launch itself is from 0 to 72 miles per hour in 2 seconds. Storm Runner also features 3 inversions throughout its 2,600 feet of track. All of this results in a ride duration of about 29 seconds from launch to brakes. Storm Runner is located near the middle of Hersheypark, sharing an entrance plaza with Jolly Rancher Remix. Despite not being the longest coaster out there, Storm Runner covers a lot of ground, flying over several different pathways. This allows for some cool views of the coaster and provides some lively kinetic energy throughout the park. And one of the best places to view this coaster is right next to the launch track, where you can see the terror and anticipation on the riders' faces before they launch. And you can also feel the whoosh of the train passing right by you at quite an impressive speed. Now, in order to ride Storm Runner, you may have to wait a bit, as this is one of the most popular rides in the park. Thankfully, a majority of the queue line is shaded, and the operations of this coaster are pretty fast. This is partially because Storm Runner features a dual loading station, which ensures that there is almost always a train ready to launch. And as is the case for most coasters, you can avoid long waits by riding this attraction early or late in the day. Once you finally make it up to the station, you'll have your pick of any row. I recommend sitting in the front or back, as they each offer slightly more forceful experiences in their own way. It's also worth mentioning that if you don't feel like waiting the extra time for the front, row 2 delivers a nearly identical experience thanks to the stadium-style seating of the trains. And these trains and seats in general are really good, with non-intrusive over-the-shoulder restraints identical to those on Fahrenheit in the same park, as well as Maverick at Cedar Point. But once those gates open up, you leave your loose articles to the side and take your seat, and you're ready for the on-ride experience. Storm Runner starts out by wiggling out of the station onto the launch track. Once the train slowly settles into position, you will watch the brakes in front of you drop, and you hear the speakers on either side of the track play the iconic "Get ready, here we go." And while this does kind of spoil when the launch is going to happen, I mostly just enjoy it because of the way that it builds anticipation. Now, when it comes to the actual launch, this is one of the most explosive launches I have ever experienced. As previously mentioned, it hurdles you from 0 to 72 miles per hour in just 2 seconds, putting 1.6 Gs of force on your body and delivering one of the fastest rates of acceleration of any coaster in the world. For comparison's sake, I'm going to bring up Accelerator again, because this launch feels very similar to the one found on that coaster. Now, this launch does do a lot of the heavy lifting to make this a great ride. I'd say it's about 70% of what really makes this coaster. But that being said, Storm Runner is not a one-trick pony, despite what the horse on the logo would make you think. Immediately following that launch, you get moderate positive G-forces as you navigate up the ride's top hat, but these positive G-forces on this transition are not particularly noteworthy because they are following a launch that is particularly noteworthy. Same thing with the lateral G-forces that you experience as you twist up the top hat. The sensation of being moved around side to side is decent if you are able to notice it. One thing that is very noticeable is the airtime as you crest the top hat. In the front of the train, you experience a brief but strong ejector pop as you begin cresting the top hat, and then you get floater airtime as you pass the apex, as where in the back of the train, it's the opposite. You float making your way up the top hat, but get ejected as you get pulled down. But no matter where you are sitting, you are going to come... That's not a good place for that sentence to end, jeez. But no matter where you're sitting, you are going to come up out of your seat a good amount. The valley that follows this top hat is where you hit your top speed, and you get some decent positive G-forces, but again, they're not super strong, and they're not what I ever really focused on. The following inversion is called a Cobra Loop, which is a goofy name, but whatever. This element doesn't provide notable forces, as it's too slow for positive G-forces to push you in your seat, or any of those lateral G-forces throwing you side to side. But on the flip side, it's too fast for any hang time, so you're not really dangling out of your seat at all. That being said, it's fun to go upside down, and it is at least a bit funky and unique because you turn as you twist back upright. The valley between this inversion and the next is same as the previous, maybe a little tighter and more forceful. Then Storm Runner treats riders to another unique element with another ridiculous name, the Flying Snake Dive. This combination of two inversions, however, is significantly better than that Cobra Loop. But my favorite part of the Flying Snake Dive is the ejector airtime you get going up into the element. This is the strongest airtime on the ride, at least in the front row, which is one of the biggest reasons I prefer to sit up front. That airtime pop is followed by what can definitely be considered a barrel roll, which is not the whippiest thing ever, and it doesn't offer the most hang time out there, but it provides a solid combo of those two things. A little bit of laterals, a little bit of hang time. This twisting seamlessly continues into the next inversion of the Flying Snake Dive, which is quite disorienting to be spinning that continuously. Adding to that disorientation are some cool visuals as you are super high off the ground, so that just really makes everything that much more exciting. But you do not stay high off of the ground for too long, as the end of this inversion dives back down towards the ground as soon as you are done twisting. This continues those lateral forces, and in the back of the train you feel some pull as you pick up speed reaching the valley. The final element of this coaster is somewhat of a wonky, funkily banking S-bend that rises upward. That's the best way I can explain it. And to be honest, this was the only part of the ride that was a bit disappointing. As you can see, it looks like the turns would give a decent amount of whip. It looks like this first part is banked 90 degrees, and it does seem to transition in and out of the turns relatively quickly. But unfortunately, I didn't find it to be whippy. That being said, this element is by no means dull, as it's still fast-paced going from left to right. It's just not forceful. I did, however, like the end of this element quite a bit, as it provides slight airtime and mild laterals. This causes you to float up out of your seat while being pushed sideways, and it's a little more interesting and dynamic than your typical floater airtime hill. You then hit the brakes with a full head of steam, concluding your ride on Storm Runner. It's also worth mentioning that this coaster is pretty smooth, with the slightest bit of rattle that caused absolutely no discomfort for me. So, what would I rate Storm Runner? I would give it a very solid 9 out of 10. Like I said, the launch does a lot of the heavy lifting, but there are still some great elements that follow, which makes this ride feel complete despite being pretty short. Although it being short is my lone criticism of the ride. I don't necessarily feel shortchanged, but the ride would undeniably be better with a tiny bit more. I do also think that this ride is slightly disadvantaged by being at Hersheypark. Hershey has so many great and intense coasters that make this just not stand out as much by comparison. That doesn't mean that this ride isn't awesome, it just means that it doesn't shine as brightly since there are so many other stars around it. But as far as where this coaster ranks, it sits within the top 13% of coasters I have been on, at number 40 out of 308. But enough of my blabbering. I'd love to know what you all think of Storm Runner and other accelerator coasters in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this, and make sure to tune in next time where I'll be talking about